What's up, ladies and gentlemen? My name is Ravi Wadden, and in today's video, we're going to be talking about the Hyundai Ioniq 5 lease deal, because in my opinion, this is one of the best lease deals in America. And the Ioniq 5 trim that we will cover in this video is the SE standard range. Now, the reason I'm going to be covering the SE standard range is because it's a much better, or it's a better value, I should say, than the SEL or the limited. And what we'll do is we'll do the 1.25% rule, which is a rule of thumb that I use to determine whether or not, a particular lease deal is a good value or not. And we'll run that 1.25% rule on the SE standard range trim and the SEL trim. And if you want to run the 1.25% on the other trims like the limited or the SE, I will provide you with the tools to do that on your own in this video. So basically what we'll do in this video is we'll cover this lease offer in detail. We'll kind of go through it step by step, and I'll give you some helpful tips and tricks along the way. And then we'll talk about the 1.25% rule of leasing, which is a rule of thumb, again, that I use to determine whether or not a particular lease is a good value or not. And then what we'll do is we'll talk about the $7,500 EV tax credit. And that, in my opinion, is what really makes this a tremendous lease deal. And then we'll end this video by talking about the lease buyout option, because to my knowledge, this lease does have a lease buyout option at the end. So if that sounds good to you guys, be sure to give this video a like or a thumbs up, and be sure to follow or subscribe to my channel. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I am on HyundaiUSA.com, and if I scroll down, you'll see the Ioniq 5. And if we look at the featured offers that are mentioned down here, here is the lease offer that we will cover in detail. It's the SE standard range. So what I'm going to do is click on view details. Now, as I mentioned in the beginning of this video, you can, lease any of the trims on this Ioniq 5. You can lease the SE standard range, is what we'll cover in this video. You have the SE, you have the SEL, and you have the limited. And as you can see, the higher the trim, the higher the monthly payment. But what we're going to do is cover this lease offer. So you can lease a 2024 Hyundai Ioniq 5 SE standard range for $242 a month. This, ladies and gentlemen, is a 36-month lease, which is pretty standard. It does require $3,507 at lease signing, and it does include the $7,500 EV lease bonus, also known as the $7,500 EV tax credit. And this offer is good until April 1st, 2024. And if you're ever shopping for a lease, you need to click on show disclaimer or something similar to it in order to read the fine print, because that's where all the good stuff is. So what we'll do is we'll click on show disclaimer. And when you read the fine print, you'll see a lot of useful information that I really like to look at. Now, what you'll see here is there's $3,507 due at lease signing, and this excludes registration, tax, title, and license. Now, what I see far too often is that people don't try to calculate, or people forget to include what the registration expense is going to be at the beginning of the lease. And a car like this here in the city of Seattle, now it's going to vary from state to state, to county to county. Here in the city of Seattle, you're probably looking at about $500 to $700 annually to keep this card registered for tabs. Now, you'll also notice that this vehicle has an MSRP of $43,175, and that's really important when it comes to doing the 1.25% rule of leasing. We'll cover that in just a couple of minutes. And here you're going to see that this lease covers 10,000 miles a year, or 30,000 miles in total. And if you were to drive this car over 30,000 miles over the course of 3 years, you're going to pay 20 cents per mile, as it is listed right here. Now, one tip here is that if you drive 12,000 or 15,000 miles a year, it is cheaper in most cases, almost all cases, to get the mileage up front when you sign your lease, rather than paying the excess mileage penalty, in this case 20 cents per mile. Now I want to bust out the calculator because I want to cover the 1.25% rule of leasing, and that's just a rule of thumb that I use to determine whether or not a lease is a good value or not. Now if a lease is under 1.5%, I'll consider it, but it's not really like a no-brainer like, hey, I need to lease this car. If a lease deal is under 1.25%, that's a great deal in my book. If it was for me or for a family member or for a friend, I would say, hey, yeah, go ahead and lease that car instead of financing that car. Now, sometimes in rare cases, a lease can be under 1%, and that means it's just a tremendous value for the amount of car that you're getting based on the MSRP. So in order to do this, what we're going to do is take the $3,507, which is the amount that's due at signing, and we're going to divide this by 36 months, since this is a 36 36-month lease. And you'll see that we'll get $97.41. So what I'm doing is essentially taking this money due at signing and I'm breaking it down into 36 equal parts. Now what I'm going to do is add the monthly payment to this amount. The monthly payment is $242. And when I do that, I get a grand total, a monthly payment with $0 down. Taxes are not included in this amount of $339 a month. Now, what I like to do in order to keep a conservative approach to my 1.25% rule is I like to just factor in what the sales tax is going to be. Now, here in the state of Washington, you only pay tax on the payment. You don't pay tax on the entire MSRP, which is what you would do if you were to finance or buy this car in cash. So what I'm going to do is just multiply this by 1.1 to account for 10% sales tax here in the city of Seattle. I know that's high. Welcome to Washington State. And when I do that, I get an effective monthly payment with $0 down, taxes included, of $373.35 a month. Now, we're not quite finished with the 1.25% rule. What I'm going to do is take this number and I'm going to divide it by this vehicle's MSRP, which is, let me look for it, of $43,175. So I'll divide that by $43,175. And when I do that, I get 0.0086. So I'll just multiply this by 100 to make this easier for you guys to read. And when I do that, it moves the decimal over 2 spots. Apologies for the siren in the background. And what you're going to see is that this is a sub 1% lease. As a matter of fact, it's 0.86%, which is well short of 1%, which in my book would make this a tremendous lease deal. Now remember, for the 1.25% rule, if your monthly payment with $0 down, including taxes, is less than 1.5% of the MSRP, that's a good deal. I would definitely consider it. If it's less than 1.25%, that's a great deal. I'm definitely considering that lease. If it's less than 1%, which is really rare, and which this lease is, it's a great deal. It's a tremendous deal. And this one sitting at 0.86 is really, really rare. I don't think there's that many cars in the country right now that you can lease for 0.86%. And the cool thing about the 1.25% rule is it really is a value metric. So if I wanted to run the 1.25% rule on maybe the SEL trim, so maybe you're shopping for the SEL trim, we could just run through this real quick. What I'll do is I'll take the due at signing amount of $34.99. I'll divide that by 36. And when I do that, I get $97 a month. I'll add the monthly payment of $399 to that amount. And that's a monthly payment with $0 down of $496. I'm not factoring for taxes here, so I'll multiply by 1.1 to account for taxes, and then I get a monthly payment with taxes included of $545 a month on this SEL trim. Now, to see what kind of value you're getting, I'm going to divide this by this vehicle's MSRP, and this vehicle's MSRP is $52,275. And when I do that, I get 1.04%. I'll actually multiply this by 100 to make this easier to read. As you can see, I got 1.04%. Now, as you can see, this is still a tremendous lease deal on the SEL trim. But in terms of value, in terms of bang for your buck, you're definitely getting a better value if you go the SE standard range. But hey, some people need the SEL trim, or maybe they want the SEL trim. I still don't think this is a bad route to go because it still is a great value. Now what I want to do is talk about the $7,500 EV tax credit, because for those of you that have been following my videos, you'll know that I've been posting a lot of lease specials on electric vehicles. And the reason for that is because electric vehicles and plug-in hybrids are just great values in terms of leasing because they get the $7,500 EV tax credit. And an important thing to remember is that if you finance instead of lease an electric vehicle, you won't necessarily get the $7,500 EV tax credit. And this Hyundai Ioniq 5 is a perfect example. Like if we lease this car, you're gonna get the $7,500 EV tax credit. If I were to finance this car or pay for it in cash, I won't necessarily, or actually I won't get the $7,500 EV tax credit. And the other cool thing about leasing electric vehicles like a Mercedes or a BMW or even a Hyundai or a Kia or a Volvo or even like the Mazda CX-90 plug-in hybrid is that you get the $7,500 EV tax credit regardless of your income. Because when you buy or finance an EV, you have to fall below a certain income threshold. when you file your tax paperwork. I think it's based on the adjusted gross income from your prior 2 years or maybe your prior 1 year. But when you lease a car, you don't, fall under that income threshold at all. So anybody can get the $7,500 EV tax credit, even if you're a millionaire or a billionaire or making millions of dollars a year. So that's also a big benefit of leasing an electric vehicle. More vehicles qualify for the credit, and there are less rules. There's no income threshold that you need to qualify for. Now, I want to direct your attention back to the computer screen to talk about what a lease buyout option is, because there's a huge misconception out there that when you lease a car, you don't have the ability to keep that car long term. You have to turn it in at the end of your lease term. Now, whether or not you turn that car back in really depends on whether or not you have positive equity in the car or not. Now, as you can see in the fine print, it says that you have the option to purchase this particular car. Now we're looking at the SEL trim, not the SE standard range. We'll look at the SEL trim. It says you have the option to purchase this car at lease end for $30,842. Now, in a hypothetical situation, let's just say that I went to the Hyundai dealership and I leased this car today, Ioniq 5 SEL, for $399 a month. Now, I know that my lease is going to end in 36 months. So around month 34 or month 35, what I'm going to do is see what the value of my vehicle is. And speaking from a practical sense, what I would do is take my leased car to every Hyundai dealership in the Northwest in this region, and I would figure out what each Hyundai dealership would offer me for my leased car. Now, as you can see, I know that the residual value is $30,842. And let's just say that one of these Hyundai dealerships that I went to was willing or offered me $34,000 for my car. Now, if this were the case, I would not just turn in my car back to Hyundai, because I would be missing out on that $3,200 or so of positive equity. So what I would do is I would either sell the car right back to Hyundai and just kind of walk away. The second thing I could do is take that $3,200 worth of equity and maybe roll it into another Hyundai lease. Let's just say that, I want to get another Hyundai, or I want to get another Hyundai electric vehicle. I could take that $3,200 and maybe put it down as a down payment. Or if I really love the car and I know that I have positive equity, I could actually buy the car. I'd have to pay tax on that purchase amount and maybe drive it around for another 6 months, maybe a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, whatever suits you. Or in the last situation, if I go to every Hyundai dealership in the area and they offer me less than $30,842, which I know is my residual value, I'm just going to walk away from the lease, because why would I buy a car that has negative equity? Or why would I buy a car when I know the moment I buy it, I'm going to have negative equity? So when you lease, you do have options at the end of the lease term. Now, Tesla doesn't allow buyout options. They're the one, major manufacturer that does not allow buyout options. But if you have a buyout option on your lease, it's always worth checking what the value is towards the end of your lease term. So for those of you that are watching that are currently in leases, be sure to get some quotes from dealers in your area, so that you're just not turning in your car blindly and maybe walking away from thousands of dollars. And with that, I'm going to call it a video. If you have any questions or comments, please drop them below. Financial knowledge is power. Please like and follow for more.